Why Jack Lockett's Sam Carver left Chicago Fire. Dick Wolf's One Chicago franchise has been one of NBC's most reliable Nielsen ratings performers since its flagship show, Chicago Fire, debuted in the fall of 2012. Aside from the ill-fated, semi-redundant Chicago Justice, which only lasted 13 episodes in 2017, the series and its spin-offs, Chicago PD and Chicago Med, seem every bit as unkillable as Wolf's Law and Order franchise. As long as the show's fans keep tuning in every week, these Windy City procedurals ain't going nowhere. Alas, the cast members aren't guaranteed to stick around for quite as long. Fans were reminded of this when, prior to the conclusion of the show's 13th season, it was announced that Daniel Keary and Jake Lockett would not be returning to the show in the fall. Obviously, long-running series like Chicago Fire need viewers to sense that every character is human, and thus vulnerable to an unexpectedly fatal end. But this doesn't mean they have to quietly accept the demise and slash or exit of a character in whom they've been invested over multiple seasons. Just look at how upset 9-1-1 fans got when Peter Krause's Bobby Nash died a deeply unpleasant death last April. On the plus side, Lockett's Sam Carver didn't book a trip to the big firehouse in the sky, though no one would have been surprised if he had. After breaking up with paramedic Violet McCamey, Hanako Greensmith, Sam, a recovering alcoholic, got back on the sauce. He was able to get sober again, thanks to rekindling his friendship with Violet, but that journey is always an uncertain one. Troubled characters like Sam are vital for a show like Chicago Fire, so why did they give Lockett the boot? The answer is pretty depressing. When Deadline broke the news that Keary and Lockett would not be returning for season 14 of Chicago Fire, they made it fairly plain that this was not a creative decision. As we have been reminded about long-running shows time and time again, they get more expensive the longer they stay on the air. And when that belt gets tightened, actors occasionally get squeezed out of the series. In the case of Chicago Fire, cost-saving measures were already in place. Series regulars were already appearing in fewer episodes to keep their salaries in check. So it wasn't a shock that, when it came time to write a couple of characters out of the show, Wolf and Company targeted 2 actors who'd been introduced later in the run. Some fans were worried about Sam's well-being after learning that Lockett was leaving the show, but he wound up putting in for a transfer to Denver, where he will continue to work on his sobriety. This came as a blow to Violet, who was ready to resume their romance. But a change of scenery seemed to be the best thing for Sam. And not paying Lockett for another season of Chicago Fire was evidently the best thing for the network. That's the harsh reality of the business, folks. It started with a spark, an actual fire, ironically enough. The kind that wasn't caught on camera, not part of a weekly NBC script, but one that burned quietly in Sam Carver's soul. Jack Lockett, the man who brought Carver to life on Chicago Fire, had known from the moment he stepped onto the gritty, ash-swept set of Firehouse 51 that this role would ignite something in him. And it did for a while. Sam Carver had always been a character written with edges, both jagged and compelling. A former troublemaker turned hero in the making, he carried the weight of past mistakes and the pressure of redemption. But even as fans grew to love him, the swagger, the sarcasm, the flashes of deep vulnerability, Lockett felt something shifting. Not in the character, but in himself. The decision to leave Chicago Fire wasn't made in a single moment. It wasn't spurred by drama or scandal, no studio arguments or tabloid-worthy feuds. No one stormed off set. Instead, it began with a series of quiet realizations, like smoke curling through the cracks of a door, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. Jack had always been passionate about storytelling, but he craved more than what the rhythms of a long-running procedural could offer. Every week, Sam Carver ran into burning buildings, cracked dark jokes, and shouldered trauma. But Jack Lockett wanted to run into different fires, creative ones. Theater stages in London's West End. Intimate indie films. A directorial debut he'd been outlining in the Notes app of his phone since season 11. Behind the scenes, he found himself staying late on set not to rehearse, but to jot down dialogue for characters that didn't exist yet. He took meetings between shoots with producers in New York, reading scripts about astronauts, artists, outlaws, all while portraying a Chicago firefighter who was beginning to feel more and more like a nuanced one by design. The writers, sensing Jack's desire for evolution, worked with him to build a slow exit that honored the character. No fiery death. No betrayal. Just the quiet, bittersweet kind of goodbye that feels true to life. In the last few episodes, Carver began mentoring a new recruit, showing signs of maturity and weariness. The jokes were still there, but so was something heavier, a restlessness, a man wondering if he was meant for more than just dousing flames. And so it was that Sam Carver chose to leave Firehouse 51 to take a leadership role with the National Fire Academy, using his experience to train the next generation. It was a noble ending for a flawed, beloved character. He walked out with his helmet under one arm, a grin on his face, and something unspoken in his eyes. The fans responded in waves, some heartbroken, others hopeful. Social media buzzed with theories. Was it creative differences? Burnout? A spin-off in the works? But Jack remained graceful and honest in interviews. "It's just time," he said, again and again. "I have stories I need to tell. I'll always be grateful for Carver, but I have to listen to that inner voice when it calls." That voice led him to new adventures. Within months, he was cast in a gritty post-apocalyptic thriller set in Iceland, then flew to Rome to star in a historical drama about Renaissance artists. On stage, he delivered a haunting performance in A View from the Bridge, earning critical praise. And in a quiet cafe in Paris, he finally finished the screenplay that had been dancing around his head since his first week on Chicago Fire. Back at Firehouse 51, the show carried on. Characters mentioned Carver from time to time. A text message here, a framed photo there. New firefighters arrived, old ones evolved, but the spirit of Sam Carver lingered in the walls. He had been, for a time, the fire within the firehouse. As for Jack Lockett, his departure was never a disappearance. It was an evolution. The kind of move artists make when they're not afraid to leap into the unknown. The fans who had followed him from the smoky hallways of Chicago Fire followed him into the fog of European dramas, stage lights, and indie film festivals. Because they knew, as Carver did, that growth sometimes means walking away from something good to find something great. Maybe someday he'll return to the show. Maybe Carver will step back into the fire, hardened by experience, with new stories to tell. Or maybe not. Maybe the character served his purpose, a chapter closed with grace, so that both Carver and Lockett could move forward. In the end, Jack Lockett left Chicago Fire not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because like any firefighter worth their weight, he knew when to stay and when to go. He knew how to face the flames, and how to walk away from them with purpose.